Welcome to the Fishcast. Once again, we have another great podcast on the line. This week, we will discuss college football, spring ball, which started this past week. We will also discuss defensive schemes with a former college football coach, Chris, aka Demo Demarest. Our last segment will discuss high school football recruiting.
Hello, welcome back to another edition of the Fishcast. I'm Corey Long, joined by the Director of Elite Scouting Service, Director of Scouting and Recruiting and Evaluations and Paychecks, and several other. He's the director of the CEO, the President, the CFO, and the Lead Secretary for Elite Scouting Services. Charles Fishbein, how you doing, Charles?
I'm doing good. The reason I'm wearing a hat, listen, I like to make fun of myself. You know that.
Wearing a hat, by the way.
What?
There's nobody there can see this. He's wearing a hat.
All right. And the reason I'm wearing a hat, dude, my wife saw some gray hairs. All right. So I ain't gonna lie.
I've seen gray hair for a while.
I know, but she wanted me to look younger, so she did dye my hair. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but
You let her dye your hair?
that shit burned. Like my hair was on fire.
You let her dye your hair?
Yeah, I didn't let her dye anything else.
Okay, well, good.
Oh man, so that's why I'm wearing a hat.
Oh,
So I know nobody can see it, but you guys, Demo's like, I don't know if I should have done this.
Try to give you some blonde highlights? What was she trying to do?
No, it's just straight brown.
Straight brown. Okay. All right.
Hey, most people like salt and pepper fish. Let it go.
I know, I'm getting old, man. I don't mind the salt and pepper, man.
Joining us once again this week, former assistant coach at Rutgers and North Carolina State and Hawaii and several other stops,
Yeah.
Chris Demarest. Good to see you again, Coach.
You too, Corey. You too,
Uh,
Fish.
You excited?
Always
All right.
talk football with you two guys. Absolutely.
All right, before we jump into the meat of the show, we got a couple of cleaning items to do, some recruiting items actually, Fish, which is rare this time of year, but you always get some early commitments. The most interesting one, and this goes along with what we talked about last week with the transfer portal, is Eric Gilbert, tight end. He was the top-rated tight end in the 2020 class out of Georgia. He went to LSU, had a very good season at LSU. I think he had over 40 catches, almost 500 yards, a couple touchdowns. Decided to hit the portal, transferred to Florida. Makes sense. Florida was losing Kyle Pitts. You know, they got a spot there. It's a good tight end offense. Well, after about 3 weeks at Florida, he's decided to decommit from that commitment, and he's going to be back in the transfer portal going who knows where. My theory on this is that Eric Gilbert is probably part of that, we'll say, elite 5% of kids that can jump into a school, play as freshmen, do and really make an impact. He's probably 10% of that 5% that actually, I'm not going to say he would do well in the pros, but he could go to pro football now and teams would at least be very excited to have him and be willing to develop him, get him a little older, get him, and within a year, he'd probably be able to perform on a pro level. He's got all the tools you want. He's 6'5", 252 pounds. He runs a 4.5. He's a freak of nature athlete. So my thinking is that he just doesn't want to play college football anymore. He did this for a year. He was an 18-year-old. He's out there dominating kids 4 years older than him. He's basically trying to figure out a way not to play any more college football. Obviously, he's going to have to get 2 more years of something in. And, I told Fish, I said, well, listen, maybe he'll do 1 more year in a situation where there's not a lot of pressure. He can kind of play in half the games and have them Jadeveon Clowney injuries. You remember Clowney's his walk year. He had them little random injury. I ain't playing this week, Coach. Because you're not trying to hurt yourself. He could do that for a year. Then maybe he'll go into the XFL or something and try to get into a supplemental draft. And this way he doesn't have to spend too much time in college ball. I'm a little confused. I don't know the whole story. So I'm going to say that right now. I just saw this a couple hours ago. I've been working on other stuff, so I don't know the whole story, but it's odd. I mean, it's just an odd thing. I mean, he's in the port. He's 1 year at a school where he's getting the football. He's a major part of the offense. He leaves, assumably to be a major part of an offense in another program. He doesn't last 3 weeks. And it's not a disciplinarian thing. He just doesn't want to be there. I just don't think he wants to play college football. I think he just wants to go to the pros.
It's very rare that to have a specimen like that coming out of high school ready for the pros in football. That's why they deemed that 3-year out rule to let the young man develop his body and everything to prepare himself, because the NFL is a different bird, man. You think college is, you should get the NFL. It's a different bird. And I think that's part of the reason why I let these young men develop. But what he's doing to me is no different than these guys opting out of the bowl games. They just opt out. They don't want, they're tired of it. They don't want to do it anymore. They're ready to go to the NFL. And, I think you got to look uniquely at this guy and say to yourself, is he going to contribute by going to class and everything else? Or do we just cut this guy loose, make a waiver for him, and let him go to the NFL? So, there's a lot of questions surrounding that. I don't know the full story either, Corey. I just read it just like you did. But there's something to what you're saying.
My biggest issue, and we've talked about this and we'll continue to talk about this, is these kids. I don't think it looks good on his resume. He's now left LSU. He wasn't even at Florida a month. I mean, they started spring practice, and he is not part of their team. I don't think NFL teams are going to look too kindly on a kid as talented as he is that can't stay somewhere for even a month. I
don't think they care because they're giving him a paycheck. It's a job at that point. You know what I'm saying? It's a whole different story when you're collecting a $25 million contract. You're staying around. You ain't worried about him opting out of that. He ain't making no money right now. So yeah, that's why you're kind of flaky. But once you get that paycheck, them teams ain't worried about you opting out of nothing.
But how many of these guys actually do something once Maurice Clarett was one of these guys that wanted to fight the system. He had that great freshman year. How many of these guys actually do something when they get to pros? You could talk about, the kid Clowney and stuff. Really, has he lived up to the hype of what he was? I mean, he's basically banged around the league now in the NFL. I think it shows a character flaw in these players. Now, they're super talented, and somebody will put up with it because Demo will tell you this. There's coaches that think they could coach lazy out of kids. They think they could coach a kid to be certain things. And football's not basketball or baseball where you don't have to love it, but you could still be an elite player and play at a high level. Football, you get exposed if you have that mentality.
Well, the problem is the NCAA is allowing this to happen. Like, it's really not the kid's fault. He's saying, I can just go here, go here, go here, go here with no penalties involved. I'm just going to do it then. Years ago, like you said, a kid had to ask to be transferred. And then if the coach said no, then he could appeal it. And he'd go to appeals committee at the university, and they would come back. 9 times out of 10, they would come back and say you could. But there was a process you had to do in able to transfer. Now it's just you just go to the transfer portal. So that's where we talked about last week without belaboring it. There's probably going to be some restrictions coming down the line.
But this, I don't really know how this. I don't think it affects him at all, NFL wise. They're going to watch him in the combine. He's in there. He measures out at 6'5", 250, runs a 4.48. He's going in the top 15 picks. That's period. I don't care. They don't care if he went to 9 schools. All they care about is what he does when he gets on that football field. If he can do that, that's all they care about. It's a different game. And it's just, the 3-year rule, I think, and I certainly understand that it's been beneficial for the NFL. It's been very beneficial for college football. It's not beneficial for the players. None of it really is. But when I say that it's not, I mean, in the sense it doesn't, they got to do it 3 years. I mean, it's beneficial from a physical development standpoint. I think it's beneficial from an educational standpoint because I think some kids that didn't necessarily like college when they started might grow to like college after a couple of years and enjoy, a lot more of the aspects. But it's, when I look at it football is the most physical sport out there. So when I look at when I see Eric Gilbert, he's probably, he might have went to a school where was a top baseball player who got drafted in the first 10 rounds, out of high school, and he's out there making, $480,000 a year. Ain't having to go to college, having to do nothing other than sit around there and learn how to hit a screwball. And I see maybe he's got a basketball kid there who knows he's only got to do one semester of college. You didn't have to do that. You're going to do like 12 games, and the kid at Duke did 12 games, say, to hell with this. I'm good enough. I'm going to be a top 10 lottery pick and be gone. And he's like, I got to be in this here for 3 years. I got to learn how to, I got to deal with these defensive tackles. I got to learn how to block. I got to be catching. I got to have, safeties trying to knock my head off and stuff. I get their point. I get where they're coming from. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Fish.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. You look at the different sports, all right? Baseball, guys have to go play in minor league systems. So a lot of guys don't just really go from high school to professional baseball. Basketball has basically become a sport where, if you're one of those top 5 or 10 guys, you could come out of high school. But the NBA, most guys that get drafted after round like the 17th or 18th pick aren't even in the league in 2 years. So I don't know. I just think football's a different thing, a different animal. You got to have these guys stay. If you had guys coming out of high school, I remember DJ Williams was the #1 player in the country. And they talked about how great he was, and DJ could go right to the NFL from high school. And he went to University of Miami, and he didn't even start ahead of Jonathan Vilma, who was a 3-star that nobody recruited. So this idea that guys can play from high school to college, the NFL, I think is bunk. I think there may be maybe one guy every 5 years that may be able to pull it off. I think the numbers would be devastating if kids went from high school to the NFL. You'd see maybe 1 or 2 over a 10-year span. I don't think you'd have a lot. It's not the NBA, the NFL, and it's not baseball. And like I said, baseball, guys get drafted out of high school, but they go to the minor leagues first, most of them. You rarely see a guy go from a mound in high school to a mound in the major leagues in year 1. You just don't see it.
It doesn't happen, but the point is that you still sign a contract. You get paid to play in those minor league games. You get paid to go through the system. Bryce Harper didn't even graduate from high school. He literally decided after his junior year, I'm going to drop out, go get my GED because I don't care about this. I'm going to be a baseball player. And you know what? He made the right move. $330 million contract later, he decided I'm going to go through the system. I'm going to do the things that because he knew that teams were going to draft him high. He knew what his skill level was. We're not saying high school to pro.
But guys aren't getting those contracts.
This kid's done a full year in college. He's not a high school kid anymore.
Yeah, but he's still a young man that, does need to still get physically and mentally more ready for that. He's not ready. 1 year, I don't buy he's ready. Maybe 2, but 1 year is still a major jump. I remember there was a quarterback at UCLA. He came out, I think he was this was back when Terry Donahue was head coach, Maddox. And he came out and he was like the first sophomore quarterback that came out. And I don't even think he made it past his first contract. It's just a major jump. The NFL is just a different animal than other sports. That's just what I believe. I remember they said Eric Lindros was a grown man when he came out of high school and he played. And he's as big and physical as he was. The beatings he took, his career was shortened probably because he didn't grow more. He wasn't able to grow in a college environment. And he was the biggest human being to probably ever step on an ice rink when he was coming out of high school. I think pro football is a different animal. I think Demo could talk about it because he's been around some of these
sport is different. When you talk hockey, those kids spend 7 or 8 years in top level juniors before they get to the NHL. It's a whole different world, and every sport's different because they've been developed to be hockey players since they were 12 years old. So when they're out there at 18 or 19, it's not like they went from playing for Pawtucket High School in Massachusetts of the Boston Bruins. They've been playing for like top level junior programs, been traveling and been doing, they've been basically living by themselves since they were about 14 and developing in that sense. So again, we're looking at a lot of different things. We're comparing apples to kumquats here in the sense that, minor league baseball players, they're getting a paycheck. There are about 5 kids that went from high school that decided to do the G League thing with the NBA developmental program instead of going to college. They're collecting $250G this year to do the same thing they be doing in college, is play basketball, go to a bunch of BS classes that give them responsibilities they don't care about before they get the big money.
But Corey, those paychecks are really nice coming into those leagues. If you're drafted after the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, and if a lot of these guys would coming out of high school or even their first year of college, that first paycheck, basically, they'll spend that in the first 6 months of being in the NFL and they're out of it. And then what do they have to show for it after that? They have nothing. It's like the NBA, you get drafted in the first round, you're getting a nice paycheck no matter what. Then, Major League Baseball, like you said, these guys get big bucks for second, third round. They get money that they can survive on for a few years. The NFL, it's not guaranteed after a certain round. And 2, the money goes way, way down after round 1 and 2. Like these guys, most of them will go round 6, 7, maybe they're going day 3.
We're not talking about them. We're talking about Eric Gilbert, who ain't going in the 7th round.
But who said?
We're not talking about them. We're not talking about the guy.
Do you think Eric Gilbert right now is a first round pick right now?
Oh yeah, I think right now if he wouldn't worked out, absolutely. Absolutely. There ain't much difference between him and Kyle Pitts other than Pitts is 2 years older.
The thing we're talking about is the NCAA college football is still the feeder system, is still the farm system, is still the development system for NFL.
Yeah.
These other sports you're talking about have different things that become that development program. They become that farm system for these other sports. The difference is they get paid to do it in college, they don't. Well, you would be surprised to see how much some young men do make. Not nearly as much as what you're saying these other guys making it, but guys do get their fair share of Pell and different things in college, plus a full athletic scholarship to go play and develop. See, I would say guys still develop in the college level. I recruited kids as freshmen and say, man, this kid's nowhere near ready for the NFL. And then 3 years later, I say, now he's ready. Okay. And just a matter of what you want to do as far as financial with these young men to decide if you want to be like baseball and hockey and all these other sports, basketball, et cetera. But some of these kids are so naturally gifted. They're so naturally gifted that boredom does set in with them. And maybe that's part of the reason what happened to this other young guy, what Corey was talking about, is he's so naturally gifted. There are rarities, that need to be able to make a waiver for him, move on. But I know the development level of the collegiate football is very, very important for these young men, because I was working with the youth football and they say, oh, this kid's the greatest kid. But you don't understand, kids get bigger, faster, and stronger as they go through youth and high school and even college to prepare themselves for that NFL, which is it is a different bird, man. The NFL is a different bird.
No doubt about that. And we're gonna this is a story we're gonna be monitoring Eric Gilbert and see where he ends up at. I do think he's gonna do another year somewhere, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those kids that decides rather than do a third year in college, he's going to figure out maybe go in the XFL. We'll see what The Rock has planned for that league when it starts back up in 2022. But I could definitely see him and other second-year college kids deciding that they feel like, I'd rather take whatever checks out there and, get paid for this and put myself in a different position than, where they're going to be at and play another year of college. Quick recruiting news. Big day for Florida State University. Sam McCall, a 5-star, 4-star, kind of in both, makes a commitment to Florida State. He actually went to my alma mater, Lake Gibson High School, one of the great athletes to come out of there. He's a safety. I would consider him one of the top safeties in the state. But from what I hear, FSU was recruiting him as a wide receiver, which is an area that he wants to play. So, and I know he committed to Florida. He backed away from that commitment when Torian Gray got fired and ended up at South Carolina. He decided he wasn't interested in going to South Carolina. I know Alabama had been high on him. So, Fish, real quickly, tell everybody your thoughts on Sam McCall.
Listen, I remember going over there to Lake Gibson, and he was a freshman, and Coach was like, hey, you got to check this kid out. I mean, he was already good as a freshman. And what's crazy is, he'll end up a 4-year starter in high school. We love Polk County. I mean, I know, Corey, you're on here, but Polk County kids, they have something. They're the closest thing to Dade County kids in the state, outside of the Tri-County area. And you just look at them, you go all the way back to Alvin Harper, to Travis Henry, to, I mean, there's just been Ray Lewis, to, it just doesn't end how many great players come out of there. And this is listen, we talked about it. Florida State is still a school that kids want to go to. I don't care if they win 3 games, 5 games. Listen, the big 3 at the end of the day recruit themselves. Kids, the one thing, and Dima will attest to this, is Florida kids believe they could turn it around at a program. They don't, if you're out winning 3 games, they'll come in and tell you, coach, we'll help you win a national title. That's why I like Florida kids, because they don't care if your record. Dima was at Rutgers when they weren't winning a lot of ball games, and he had to sell these kids. These kids are, coach, we got you. We got you. And that's the Polk County mentality. Derwin was that way. Derwin James was that way. Ray Lewis was that way. These guys are different animals. And I love Sam McCall. I think he's a big time get. And from this is good moment. Like other kids, we talked about it. When you get big time kids that commit to you, and they've had a couple big time kids already commit to them, other big time kids want to play with those guys. So this is a big get for them. And, they got to carry it. They got to show it now. Now they got to go get it done next season. Like I said, I think 7 wins. They got to get to at least 7 wins next year. And I think they'll be able to hold on to most of these guys.
Yeah, Polk County's a special place. I recruited a lot of players out of Polk County. They became great players at the collegiate level, and some of them onto the pros. I was telling Corey last week, Jeff Cheney was a great running back at Florida State and did a lot at Florida State. He wasn't a very high star kid, but had a lot of want to and heart. And when he got there, man, he was a very good football player. But if you look around, there's Polk County kids all over the place. But you're right, they play like 305 kids. They're very, very close.
Yeah, Jeff Cheney out of Lake Wales. And, I'm a Polk County kid, so I love talking about the kids in Polk County. And Lake Gibson's just loaded with talent. You look at some of their other top prospects, Javante McClendon, another top prospect in this class, Jalen Glover, a running back. They've got a 2023 defensive back named Cormani McLean, who I think is going to be one of the top defensive backs in the state of Florida. So not only a big commitment for Florida State, but having a pipeline at that school. And I credit Odell Higgins for a lot of this. You talk about—
I was just going to bring up his name, the Bartow man himself, Odell Higgins.
You talk about a guy who knows, who just pounds the pavement in Polk County. He is Polk County bred, and everybody in that county knows him and knows about him. And and Florida State is a place that, and a lot of, because of Odell and because of Jeff Cheney and Derwin James and Melvin Pearsall, and you can go back, is like Polk County, Florida State has a huge, it means a lot to Polk County kids to get a Florida State offer. It is a big offer. It is as big as Alabama or Georgia or any place else in Polk County, because those kids there, Florida State means a lot to them.
There's no question. This is a big-time get. So I think we took this segment as far as we're going to take it. I'm excited to get into, we're going to discuss spring football and what the college football, spring football is coming on. I think University of Florida already started their spring football last week. Miami's up next, as well as Florida State. And we're going to get some insight, as I know a lot of fans don't know a whole lot of what goes into spring football coming off of winter conditioning. But on the other side, we're going to talk to Coach Demo about it and hang out. You're going to hear some great information, and we look forward to talking to you guys on the other side.
Back. It is spring season again. The weather is warming up. The flowers are blooming. The thunderstorms are coming back. And that means we got more football. The football season never ends, baby. Not only am I watching FCS football every week because I'm just a junkie, but we got a spring season starting up. The kids are going through the workouts, the lifts. They're about ready to hit that field. They got, 12 practices? Then they got the big intra-squad game that we're going to get this year. Last year, a lot of schools didn't get a chance to get a full spring. That won't be an excuse this year. They're after it. What do you think so far? What have we heard about some things happening in the spring so far?
Well, they started it, and that's all that matters. COVID didn't affect it this year, and that means life's getting back to normal. And like I said, I'm excited about this because a lot of the fans that we're talking to right now, really, a lot of the stuff is made up from the fan base websites. Everything's rosy. You're undefeated. We're playing for a national title. Mackenzie Milton is running a 4.4 with a knee brace. I mean, fans, especially certain fan base sites, pump up their team in spring football. But some of the stuff, that I want to go into with Demo is, you come off the conditioning drills of the fall or earlier this, the last couple months. Now we go to spring football. Demo, you've been part of the whole process, being a college coach. Take us through what a spring schedule. You're coming off a season, winter conditioning. Tell us a little bit about what you go through as a coach during winter, spring football.
Well, the nice thing about spring football, as a coach, I always loved spring football because I know spring recruiting was right around the corner. But, not to take away from the fall and the games and all that great stuff, but spring was very unique because you went into the spring undefeated and you left undefeated, But what happens is it's a brand new football team because your seniors have graduated. And a lot of times a senior-dominated team is usually a very good football team because those people have been with you for a long time. You're able to develop and get in your system, et cetera. So you're looking for a new football team and you're looking for different positions. Some guys are returning back, but a lot of them aren't. And so what you try to do is find players to fit those positions of the guys that graduated. And you have some players already ready to go. Okay, when this guy graduates, I can't wait for this kid to step in, et cetera. You have a chance to go out in the field and compete. You're not really worried about preparing for another team. You're just worried about installing fundamentals and different things like that. You're not really worried about, preparing for another team, so to speak, as far as strategy and different things are concerned. You're really looking to develop your people to come out of spring with a first, second, and third team roster. You're looking also to be able to say, okay, well, if this guy gets hurt, he can go there. There's a lot of position changes that happen in the spring. And a lot of times people come out of springs with a depth chart. And a lot of times say, well, the quarterback position, we really don't know who the quarterback is. Yes, they do. They know who the quarterback is. After 15, 12 days or whatever spring practice, they know who the starting quarterback is, but they don't want a kid to jump on a transfer portal and leave. So they don't want to get them all disgruntled. So they say, we don't know. Stuff like that happens. But spring football to me was very, very exciting because there was downtime between each practice. You weren't getting ready for the next practice the next day. You actually had a period in between where you had a day off, where you could get in the office, evaluate the film, have a lot of film study with your players, and prepare them for the next practice and give them times in between. It wasn't really spent a lot of conditioning because you just came off your winning conditioning program. So your players should be in so much shape physically. So a lot of the stuff wasn't spent conditioning like you do some little bit in the fall camp. You run a little bit, et cetera. So there's a lot of very fundamentally sound stuff you're looking for, and try to find new kids to fill the roles of the people that left.
Well, you come off a season, Demo. Now, what are some of the young players that you brought in? Maybe they come in early, they enroll early. How many of those guys are able to step in right away and make an impact even during that spring?
Well, it depends what your roster looks like. If you've done a good job of recruiting over the years, then you don't have to go to that freshman level sometimes to play kids. But I was always like, the best kid's going to play. It doesn't matter to me if he's an incoming freshman or early enrollee or what have you. Even if he came into training camp in the fall better than the guys ahead of him, he was playing. That was just the way I operated. But what happens is, I think sometimes through your development program, now we explained about the strength training and all that different things in the off season, a lot of these kids are prepared to take that next step. So it's exciting as a coach when you get to go on spring practice to say, okay, I want to watch this kid go in this position that's open right now. I want him to fill it because I've been watching him for the last year or two and he's ready for that position. So that was the exciting thing about spring ball leading up to the spring game. You kind of play against each other, but it's more vanilla. But you get to have an idea of what your talent level may be compared to some other teams. And then you would maybe if you're going to face an option team next year, you might spend a little time in practice ready for an option team like an Army or Navy. If you're playing a one-back spread, throw the ball over the place team, you might spend a little time in spring practice preparing for that. But the majority of it, you won against each other.
How important were the spring scrimmages important, or was the spring game just a fluff thing for the fans? How much of a difference is there really between a spring scrimmage and the actual spring game?
What usually happens in the spring, you start out with, helmets and shoulder pads, and you get into full gear. And then certain period of times you have a half scrimmage, a full scrimmage. Those were the times when you really wanted to evaluate the kind of talent and who was going to fill those voids. By the time the spring game rolled around, you were done with spring practice. You had an idea who was going to fill in what void, but that was more for the fans, more fluff. Some of them have autograph signings, a bunch of different things go on during the spring game, activities, etc. So the spring game is more for the fans and the players to enjoy themselves, not really to say, wow, we got a really good team. But there's some players that do shine in spring games, but it would be more for the fans than it would be for actually putting in a scheme or a system.
So now the spring game is over, everything. What happens next? Do the players go home? Do they stay on campus, most of them? Do they get ready for summer workouts before they get into the fall where they have to, they get ready for the season? What happens at that point once the spring game's over?
Well, years and years and years ago, there was different seasons to football. Now it's like one continuous year. These people have budgets, they have money, they have all kinds of things to keep these players on campus all year round, even through the summer. So usually what happens after spring ball, there's a period of time where there's an evaluation process. A lot of the players go see their position coaches. They get evaluated how they did in the spring. Then they have an ending meeting with the head coach. They explain to the head coach, explains to them where they fit on a team, where he thinks they fit per their position coach, etc. Then usually the kids have some downtime, maybe finish up the spring semester, maybe have a week or two to go home or whatever. But then they're back in campus with summer school, getting ready for the off-season training program during the summer.
Final question with this before we go on to our next segment. So spring's over, how much of a snapshot of the spring tells you what you're looking forward in the fall? Could you tell oh man, we're not going to be real good, or we're going to be really good? Can you tell enough from that spring to judge what you're looking forward in that fall?
Yes, I think you can. I think you can really have a good feel of how good your football team is, because like I said, you're coming off your winter conditioning program, okay, which should be very tough. And then you're getting into spring practice where these guys are competing, and you should have an idea what your football team's like going into the fall. Now, you might not have an idea what all the other football teams look like because they're going through the same thing, but you should have a good idea what your football team looks like. And like I said, in years past, I was getting ready to go on the road in April and May, be on the road the whole time recruiting. So a lot of the position coaches also take off on the road, and they're gone. So they're not around. That's where it's important that the strength coach takes over, and the head coach is always there, obviously. But now the NCAA did away with that again this year. So the assistant coaches will be on campus, throughout the whole spring, et cetera. So it'll be a different kind of scenario compared to what I've been used to in the past.
Well, there you got it. I don't know if Corey wants to jump in and
before we go, I got one quick thing about how different this spring has been to others. And I told this to you the other day, Fish. New Mexico State was one of 3 programs that opted out of the fall, did not send them to play in the fall. As part of their spring workouts and practices, they decided to schedule games against FCS programs, which I thought was pretty wise. Your team hadn't played a full contact game in well over a year, so they end up scheduling games against Tarleton State, and they've got a game coming up against, I think, Dixie State. They're playing these games in El Paso at the Sun Bowl because New Mexico's still not allowing athletic contests. Well, the first game against Tarleton State happened last Saturday, and they end up losing 43-17. Now, Demo, if you had a team that you had for spring, and they played an FCS team, a brand new Tarleton State was D2 until January 1st. They were a D2 team.
Wait,
comes out in the spring and loses by 26 to basically a D2 team. You're quitting. I mean, you're
Hey, wait,
players.
Corey, you got to ask the question first. Did our pal Timmy Norling give Tarleton State some grad transfers to help them? Because then Demo will answer the question a little differently, you know?
Yeah, that's what's scary about going some against these FCS teams. There's all these FBS schools. Yeah, we're going to go play this team. We'll play that team. We'll be okay. We're FBS. Then all of a sudden, this FCS school spanks them. And then they got to take a look in the mirror like, holy smokes, what just happened? We got to reevaluate our program. But, you know, I mean, the whole thing is crazy to me. But what kills me is a lot of these people pound on the table to get in the SEC, ACC, Big Ten, whatever. And then when they get in the conference, they start playing conference teams that are in the conference. And they're like, wait a minute. We want to play this FCS school and this FCS school and this FCS school because we want to get 3 wins and then only have to win a couple games in our conference and then we'll get the bowl game. Well, you better be careful of those FCS schools, like you just said, because they might win a game.
Yeah, like there's always that team. There was always that team that was scheduled North Dakota State that first game of the season. It's like, no, that's a bad idea.
Right.
Bad idea.
The Big Ten teams always like, you know, pull that off, and them in Southern Illinois always make somebody's life miserable. So.
Oh yeah, I just don't understand these guys that pound on the table to get into a conference. Then they get into the conference, but they still want to play 3 pansies and win, and then go play their schedule in their conference. Okay, we're okay now. We're going to make a bowl.
Got to keep that paycheck coming in.
Every conference, everybody should play. If you're in a Power 5 conference, your out-of-season schedule should be a Power 5 conference team. That's what I feel. Not enough playing these FCS teams. If you're a Power 5,
you gotta pad that schedule for that paycheck, D-Well. Like you need a few like stressless nights where you win a game and you know like the fan base is happy for 3 days. All right.
Hey, it's basically for $1 million. Western Carolina will come in and let you beat them 69-0. Trust me.
You got
it. Get $1 million or something.
That was a great segment, man. I think it was a great segment. And any final words, Corey, before we bounce out to our next one?
My final words are, with it being 85 degrees here every day the past week, I'm happy I don't play spring football. So I have to say, it's hot outside.
Hey, how about these teams up north playing spring football in the snow right now? So it's just the opposite, reverse.
It's crazy, man. But it's the life we live, man. And we. College football is like the mob. Once you get in, you never get out. I've been saying the last couple of years, man, I don't know how much longer I want to do this, but every year I keep doing it. So it is what it is. But
back, we're going to talk schemes.
Yep.
Talk schemes with Chris Damaris and Charles Fishby. We'll be right back. Back here on the Fishcast, and we're going to be talking schemes, quarters coverage, cover 2, cover 3, cover 0. What does it all mean? Doesn't matter what you run if you got the dudes. Who's running the right coverages? Who's running the wrong coverages? Coach Damaris, guide us in the right direction on this one.
Well, obviously, there's different schemes that people run. It basically is what they know is what they run. You know, it worked for them at the previous place they were, and they moved on to the new place. And a lot of guys want to jam round pegs to square holes. And when you do that, you're asking for a problem. You might be getting over here or there, but when you have to go against another team that's pretty good, you're gonna get exposed a little bit by taking personnel that you have and forcing them to do what you know, instead of having the personnel, what they're good at, being able to adjust to what they're good at and running that kind of scheme. So the first one is quarters coverage, which is really basically 4 across in the secondary, because what happens was it evolved to offenses running 4 verticals, and they used to run them back in the day versus cover 3, and they used to stroke them, their safety lean one way, throw to the other guy. There's 4 lanes. What quarters was able to do was say, okay, we're going to put a guy on top of each guy that runs the route. The corner's going to take the outside guys, the safeties will take the inside too, and we'll have players above players so they can't run their 4 verticals. But then offenses started getting smart, and they started making the safeties sit down and running the post behind the safeties, which is a quarters beater. And they started, offensive coaches are smart. They started watching the rules for quarters, and they said, okay, this is the way we can beat it. And they've been doing that. I've always believed a quarters coverage was best inside the 20, in the red zone, where the field is twice as wide as it is long. And now you don't have to ask your players to cover man all over the place without help. So that's kind of what quarters coverage is. It's a pretty decent coverage to help stop the run, but a lot of guys know it, and that's all they know. So whenever they go to the new program where they're at, they try to run that system, and they might not have the players to run that system. So that's what you get into a little bit when you start to do that. And then you have cover 3, where it's eyes on the quarterback. See, man, your eyes are on the man. Zone, your eyes are on the quarterback. So you get cover 3, where it's more of a 4 under 3 deep scheme. What we're talking about, each guy's responsible for a third in the back half, and underneath there's 4 zones, and their eyes are on the quarterback. Well, what revolved out of that was this system called cover 1, or man free, where they still had a free safety in the middle of the field, so your corners didn't have to cover the whole field. They knew they had post help. Then you had a low hole player that was underneath him, and then the rest of the guys were locked up man. And now you have people playing with help, unlike quarters where you didn't have help. And then you went to a thing called 0, where there's no help, and there's no free safety. There's nobody there at all. And you're bringing people and expecting people to cover people all over the field. And you think your blitz is going to hit home, so the quarterback doesn't have time to hold on the ball. And the last one is cover 2. And there's many different versions of cover 2. People just see 2 safeties high. You can go 5 underneath zones and 2 safeties deep with their eyes on the quarterback. Or you can have 5 under man, 2 deep. And now you have the safeties playing halves of the field, or they can high-low, which people call lurk, or they could double different receivers. And then all these coverages, these corners and these safeties play different leverage, depending on the splits of the receivers, inside leverage, outside leverage, pre-snap leverage, post-snap leverage. So there's a lot of different things that go into these different coverages, the way that people play them, but very rarely do it just look vanilla to people, but they're more than that when they get into the scheme itself.
When you get into these different schemes, you start to talk about personnel. Being from down here in Dade County, a lot of these kids are just used to playing straight up man, like you were saying. They're not used to cover, quarters coverage and this and that, and thinking like, hey, this guy's crossing me, so I got to let the guy net. They're so aggressive. They're not used to letting somebody just take their zone. Does it become an issue with when you're recruiting? Are there certain kids that maybe they're from areas of the country that are more comfortable playing in these type of schemes, and then others you're like, it just isn't going to work?
See, when you play zone, there's a lot of rules you have to follow. If this guy does this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, pass this guy off and do it. So there's a lot of repetitions that have to take place in practice for you to be able to get really good at zone. Like the Seattle Seahawks used to run a lot of cover 3. I think they still do. Your eyes are on the quarterback. You're getting to your drop zone, and you're breaking off the quarterback's throw. You're passing off routes, etc. But when you take over a program and you say, okay, this is my identity, this is what I'm running, then you have to go out and recruit players to fit into that scheme. But some players, especially down in the South, are accustomed to playing a lot of man-to-man coverage because they're good at that, depending on what leverage they have, bump and run, et cetera, bail, bait, whatever they want to do, play off, et cetera, understanding leverage. And they always, for the most part, had help, maybe a deep middle safety or a low hole player that they were to help them with. So now the player only had to cover a third of the field, but he still had to run with the player, but he had help in those other areas. So yes, I believe that if you're going to go down and recruit certain kids, you can't recruit a kid that's used to playing this and bring them up to try to force them to do this, because then you're going to have a conflict and you might have something that's not going to work. You keep working it, but it worked for me over here. It worked for me at this place. Well, these kids' identity don't fit into that scheme that you're running. You keep doing it, it's eventually going to cause you a problem.
All right, you went to the Orange Bowl this year. You had a chance to see Texas A&M. They have one of the top defensive coordinators in the country, and Mike Elko. He had a lot of success, at Wake Forest. I think he may have even been at Notre Dame. I'm not 100% sure. But Jimbo hires him. You saw them in their bowl game. One of his, the guys that comes off I think the Elko tree is also Coach Fuller, Adam Fuller, that plays at FSU. there's people that tell me, hey, they play the same scheme, but are they exactly the same? Are the schemes exactly the same? Is it personnel? Why does one program have success? You know, the A&M's, I know Elko's been there like 2 or 3 years. Is that the reason they're having more success? Or is it something that may not be able to work out at one school, but it will work at another? What are your thoughts on something?
Well, the first thing is consistency. The more you have consistency, the more players keep coming into your system. The players that before them will basically teach them how to do it. I mean, it's a brother thing. You know, I'm going to teach my brother this because I want to win games. I'm going to help him. So consistency on his staff is very important. When I was at Florida State, you know, I worked for Mickey Andrews, and Coach Andrews was very simple with what he did as far as his schemes. However, he demanded a ton from those players in practice. Where I learned how to coach, they demand a lot from your players, expect them to be perfect, and demand nothing but that. That also, but you had players, you see, you had great players. You could be a little more simpler. Although there's some subtle things that go on, like I said last week, that the naked eye don't see: leverage, post-snap, pre-snap, etc., that you don't see that's being coached up. But for the most part, you have players. Don't restrain them. Don't hold them back. Let them go. Let them be good at what they do. And that's what I believe Coach Andrews was good at doing. And then you go down to Texas A&M. I watched play in the Orange Bowl. They have the same thing. They have dudes. They have players. So like Corey said it early on, it really doesn't matter what you do scheme-wise as long as you have players. However, let them be best at what they do. And then when you do something, it's very subtle. You slant the line, you change contain, you change leverage, you change where your help is from the secondary, different things like that. But you're still allowing your players to play. And I think that's kind of a comparison between Texas A&M and my days at Florida State when Coach Andrews was the defensive coordinator.
All right, you're talking about Coach Andrews. Hold on one second, Corey. I'm excited to ask this question. I think the one thing that makes great coaches, all right, is, and guys that become great coaches, what made Mickey so great is adapting. I think Mickey adapted when he saw Nebraska play University of Florida that year in the national championship. Florida went no back, and they said, you know what? We're going to punish the quarterback. And Nebraska punished Florida's quarterback. And I think Mickey learned a lot from that scheme and carried it over. And I think he made changes. And I think you were talking about coaches, round peg, round hole, square hole, that they don't make those changes. That's what made Mickey so special. I mean, but can coaches make those changes if they're not used to making them?
There's a lot of things that made Coach Andrews very special, and that's why I was very privileged to work for him at Florida State. I mean, he played for Bear Bryant. You know, he's from Alabama. He's very demanding and very tough on the field. He's very different on the field as he is off the field. And I would say to myself, who is this guy? But on the field, he demanded perfection. He demanded players to get to the ball because you did have good players. But he was different off the field. But he was able to adapt. A lot of times when I was down there, Nebraska would visit us, or we would go visit Nebraska for different ideas and different things, how to do stuff. So Coach Andrews was adaptable. And you had a good staff with Jim Glad, and you had a good staff with, Odell was there. You had a good staff with Chuck Amata. So you had good coaches and consistency on that staff. That was very important, that the players were getting coached the same things year in and year out. And the coaches were changing a little bit to adapt, but they were basically hearing the same thing. That's what made Florida State, I believe, so successful in Coach Andrews.
And it's interesting that you brought up that Nebraska-Florida game because Ed Chester, who played in that game, was Florida D tackle at Florida out of Brooksville, out of Springstead High School, actually. He would always say that Robbie Pruitt was their D coordinator. Ended up coaching at Marshall a year after. They ran a scheme in that game they had never run before. They tried to do some sort of containment thing. They were basically worried about trying to let their running backs go off and get, they were trying to do a bunch of little eye candy instead of just playing aggressively. So what happens is Pruitt leaves. Spurrier hires a guy named Bob Stoops. Bob sees, he sees Ed Chester, he sees Javon Curse, he sees Mike Peterson, he sees these dogs, and Florida Gators have had some monsters on defense. And he's just like, what the hell are we doing? Putting these guys in any sort of, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go straight forward. I want this to be a highway and you're a Ferrari and you're going down as fast as you can. And I think that's what you say about just letting players do what they do best. And he basically said, our new defense is attack and punish people, because I'm not going to hold you back. We're taking off all the reins. You guys are too big, too athletic, and too strong to be held back into some sort of a scheme where you got to think too much, frankly.
Well, I was very fortunate. I was at Florida State at the right time. I mean, I was also there with the originators of the off-season conditioning program, Matt Drills, the originators of it. So when I first got there, like, what the heck is going on here? There were people flying all over the place. People are losing their minds, going crazy, trying to make the players quit. And it was unbelievable to me. So one day I turn around, there's Coach Osborne with the Nebraska staff watching us go through the mat drills. They brought the mat drills back to Nebraska. And then they also said, we got to start recruiting a little speed at Nebraska, because the reason why we're not holding our own against the Floridas and the Florida States is speed. So they did. They went out and recruited some speed. They still have the old Nebraska way, but they went out and recruited some speed. But I never forget those mat drills that in the off season, which I truly believe that's where the tone of your program begins and ends, in that mat drills, because character, development of your team, toughness, everything that you look for was developed in those off-season mat drills when I first got my induction to that the first year I was at Florida State.
Well, I'm ready to go. You got me excited about this, but we were going to discuss some other stuff. We'll leave that to next week, another coaching segment as far as different things about schemes and stuff. We have one more segment, Demo, we want to get to. We'll get to it, make it a quick one, but it's going to be recruiting, and we talked about it. There's a ban on recruiting basically through June 1st, and the impact it's going to have, and we'll get to it on the other side.
Back at the Fishcast, and COVID has killed recruiting. I mean, recruiting used to be done year round. You had your games, and you had your camps, and you had your spring evaluations. Then kids were on your campus. They saw your spring practices, your spring games. You bring them back for your summer camps, your summer showcases. Then you watch them again in the fall. Well, you know what? Can't go nowhere anymore. Can't go no camps. Coach can't hold camps. The dead period's been extended to June 1st. It might get extended longer than that. Who knows what's happening? How have coaches been able to adjust to these changes in recruiting?
Well, I'll tell you real quick is that I believe recruiting for colleges is very similar to the draft in the NFL. The more you're around the player that you want to get, the more that you understand who he is and how he fits into what you want to do as a coach and as your team. Just like the NFL has the combine, then the NFL has, you can go on campus and work the kid out. Then you can bring the kid to your complex and have him there for 24 hours or whatever. It's the same thing like recruiting. You want the kid on campus. You want to see the kid as many times as you can to evaluate him, not just athletically, because his film's going to tell you everything you need to know. Okay. But have you talked to the coaches? Have you talked to people in the school outside of the coaching staff? Have you talked to the woman in the cafeteria? Have you talked to the maintenance people? Have you talked to the grounds? Have you talked to everybody you possibly could about this kid? And of course, they're not all going to say it's all roses. Then you start scratching your head. Wow, it's all roses. I better worry about this kid. Oh, this kid's this, but he's really this. He does this and this, but he really has this. So that's what you miss with this off-campus, in-person contact and evaluations. You miss that really. That's why these people are referring to the transfer portal, because they get to watch them on film against other college kids, and be able to evaluate them against them. That's why this is happening, because I believe the absence of off-campus, in-person contact and evaluations.
I'll be able to do the spring football season, and hopefully you'll come down and make some trips with me. We having a recruiting service, the rules don't apply to us. We're going to be able to go into the spring, but I remember going into school in Jacksonville, and there was a top-rated player. I won't mention his name. He's probably in jail right now. But I remember walking in, and the advisor was this woman that had been around all these kids, did all their transcripts. And I said, oh, so tell me about this kid. She's like, he's the worst kid that's ever come through this school. Now, this school was in downtown Jacksonville. You got to think the worst. I said the worst football player that's ever come through here, or the worst student, like overall. She's like, in my 15 years, this is the worst kid ever. Like, I wouldn't send him to my worst enemy. I said, Rick. And the kid went to school and he never made it in college. And that's something you're not going to get on film. And you're not going to get that on a phone call with a kid or a parent or any handler that's dealing with these kids these days. That was why the part of the evaluation that's huge. What I ended up doing is I wrote my notes down. Now, I didn't trash the kid, but I basically said, I don't know if this kid can make it in college. He may have, like I worded in a way in the evaluation where it didn't kill the kid, but coaches got the point. Hey, we can't, Fish is basically telling us in his own way, like, I don't know if this kid can handle 4 years of college, So that's something I think that's lost in this whole process. And part of my evaluation, Demo, and you could jump in about this in a couple seconds, is the film doesn't lie. A kid can either play or he can't play. I remember I've talked to college coaches about this. At the end of the day, you wouldn't be recruiting him if the kid can't play. But you don't see, I remember that me and Corey went to watch, it was First Coast play, and they had a kid, Jermaine Thomas, ended up going to Florida State. They had two other kids, a kid, Nigel Carr, who was a 5-star linebacker that everybody thought he was unreal, and they had another kid, Avis Comack. Now, we go to the game, Nigel Carr quit. He quit on the sideline, literally just took his pads off, quit. Avis Comack basically didn't show us anything. Jermaine Thomas went up and down the sideline. They had just lost the lead, which they had the whole game, and he's cussing the guys out on the sideline going, mother effers, we're going to win this game. And keep your head up and blah, blah, blah. And I turn to Corey and I go, dude, the best player on this team is this kid that ain't ranked, they're taking. And who had the biggest impact at Florida State? Jermaine Thomas. So that part of the evaluation, I tell people, you got to see people live. And I don't know what they're going to do. I'm really interested to see. You may have a team in the next 4 years. Corey said basically the Final Four is basically locked in every year. These last 2 years, I think you may see a team that just got lucky and rolled the dice and hit on players that they had no idea if they were good or not.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Back to this transfer portal for 1 second, because that's where this is all leading to. All they're doing is getting an evaluation on a kid. Because I told you, I have coaches told me, thank God we got rid of that kid. And the school that the kid's going to, the coach was like, yeah, we got that kid. Yeah, but the other guy's saying, oh, we did our due diligence. He's a good kid. Well, he fits in. Basically, he's just better than what you had. That's why you took him. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Yeah. But back to what you said, Fish. See, those were my kind of guys. The guys, I didn't want a kid to quit. Take off his shoulder pads and quit. That was done. But if a kid was having an issue here or there, I wanted to continue to meet with that kid to find out what that issue really was. And then as a coach, I could say, I can handle that issue. If he comes to this university, I can handle that issue. One thing that you can't handle is quitting. That's a hard thing to handle as a coach. And that's why through Mickey and through Bear used to say, I'm so tough on these kids in practice because if they're going to quit, I want them to quit in practice, not the game. You know what I mean? But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the one thing, even with my son's football team, when we did the flag football, I said, listen, the one thing is effort is the one thing that you can control. You can't control how talented the kid is or that's God-given ability. But at the end of the day, effort is 100% on that player. And you, in football, if you don't give effort, you will be exposed.
I think the bottom line is this. How much does that kid value and love football? If he does, those issues that he has could be corrected because he loves it so much. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to take it away from him. But if a kid quits, then he's telling you he doesn't value it that much. He's quitting. Who cares? Or I'm going to go here, transfer everywhere. It doesn't matter to me. That it's not. I don't value it that much. So that's why a lot of kids that I used to run into, you don't want to recruit him. I said, wait a minute, let me make that decision. You know what I'm saying? Let me evaluate this kid. Let me see if I can work with him. And that's part of coaching. Part of coaching is working with kids to help them make sure they succeed, not just to recruit a kid right on the field and coach say, yeah, I did this. It's recruiting. It's working with kids, making sure they're doing the right things, not giving up on them as soon as they come on campus. So that part of it, I think, is gone. There's a lost art. But I used to want kids that you said like that, Fish. If there was an issue, as I never heard rose glasses of all these kids, but I want to know, does he love it? Will he really be terrible if it's taken away from him? And could he correct the things that are so-called his issues?
One final thought on this whole thing. Do you think like the Zoom calls and everything, is it going to change recruiting where some staffs and program like administrators are going to go, well, you know what, it's cheaper. It's just a new way. This is how we should recruit. Because I believe if it gets to that, those schools will fail. At the end of the day, more schools will fail doing that because you have to have in-person. You got to know what you're buying. You can't just go to the grocery store and say, hey, buy this, buy that, and somebody ships it to your house. It's probably, it could be spoiled. I think you're taking a chance on something that a lot of that in-person evaluation, like I said, at the end of the day, the film, you're not recruiting a kid based on just that film. I tell kids when I step on campus, I want to see how you talk to your coach. I want to see if that kid's looking at the coach when he speaks. I want to see if that coach, when you talk to a teacher, is the kid disrespectful in class? Is he slouched down in his chair? I remember one year, Dave Kelly was at UCF and they landed a top class and everything. And there was one kid that was left out of I think they brought 12 kids in. The final kid was the highest rated kid. And he goes, Fish, we can't take the kid. I won't mention him by name, but he went in O'Leary's office. He was slouched down in his chair. He wouldn't talk directly. And he goes, what? And the kid didn't have success in college. So like that part of the evaluation, you want to know that, hey, we're buying the goods, that this is a real deal. And I don't think that comes from a Zoom call. Like any kid could get on a Zoom call and BS his way through a Zoom call. You want to be around him and feel him and see how he reacts around others.
A few things. That's all they have right now. So they have to be the masters of the Zoom, right? Oh, our head coach, he's the master of the Zoom. He has the masters of all this stuff. We got virtual, we got this, we got that. They have to be the masters of something, right? Because they're getting the kids to commit, et cetera. But I'm saying this, if I'm a kid and I'm committing on a Zoom call and I haven't even seen those coaches, I haven't even seen that university, I'm just going off secondhand knowledge and I'm just going off a Zoom call, it works just the opposite for the kid too. The kid better go look at that school. He better go watch those kids play in person. Or maybe that's telling a little bit of something about the kid. He doesn't have many offers. He's jumping on that offer right away without fully investigating that school he's at. I tell kids all the time, whether you're a walk-on or whatever it may be, you better investigate that school, that coaching staff, those position coaches, to make sure before you commit to anything that you can fit into that coaching staff, into that team, to that environment, to that university. But that's what's happening with these Zoom calls. Oh, the coach did such a great job on the Zoom call. We committed. What? But okay, if that's what you decide to do, that's great. I would tell my kid, you got to go see the school. You got to go meet these coaches. You got to wait. You got to do something. Put 10 masks on. Go meet these guys. But something's got to happen because I don't think you can continue to do it, Fish, or it's going to catch up and you're eventually going to fail.
No doubt. Corey, any last thoughts on this?
My prediction is that the dead period will end on the 1st, but they will not allow summer camps this year. They'll allow kids to take visits, but they won't allow them to work out, which I think that's probably the best that coaches can hope for right now.
Well, we'll break it right now. Me and Demo are going to have some camps. If you want to help us, Corey, we're going to probably do about 5 camps starting June 1st. So we'll do them.
I'm all in. You know me. I got Polk County coming.
You got to come, baby.
Hey, I'll say one quick thing, all right? Corey did a combine with me, and he knows how serious I am. He didn't want to let me down. He's like, man, Fish may not be friends with me anymore. And it was crazy. So my sister at the time, she passed away. So I had to go to her funeral on the day of the combine. And I'm like telling my wife, oh, man, I don't know if Corey could get this done. I showed up at Lake Gibson High School, the parking lot, the lines around the corner. I'm like, damn, Corey, it cost Corey probably about $1,500 out of his pocket, but he made sure that thing was packed. He was like, I ain't crossing Fish.
We had some kids there too. We had
Derwin James. We had, dude, like Derwin worked out. Like Corey's like, listen, you got to work out, man. Like I paid your $100 admittance into this thing. You better work out. But Corey,
I get the same thing. I'm crazy with camps too. I say, man, this kid's paying money. Somebody's parents, grandma, somebody paid the money to come here. I'm gonna give this kid everything I got. And then you say I'm crazy, whatever. But I just believe the kid needs to get everything he needs to get in that camp that he's been missing in whatever, however area needs to be filled. So I'm with you there.
All right.
Real quickly before we go, I hate to end the podcast on a tragic note, but real sad story out of Jacksonville last night. Louis Nix III, former recruit that we're all familiar with here, played at Notre Dame, was just a big 300-pound, one technique that could get the job done, was extremely effective and popular player at Notre Dame, got drafted by the Texans. He was found, he had been missing for a few days. His family found him dead at 29 years old. I think you recruited him for a little, or somebody on your staff recruited Louis for a little bit, right, Demo?
I think so. I remember him, and again, he did go to Notre Dame, and I just saw that piece. But just to reverse side of that, there was another positive thing that did come out. Roger Pollard, who was Vilma's linebacker mate down at Coral Gables High School, was missing as well down in Miami, but he was found alive. So that's a positive note to the negative thing that you just mentioned. And I know Roger personally. He played at NC State when I was there. And, of course, Jonathan Vilma was his linebacker mate at Coral Gables, and now he's back there as the head football coach. But as sad as that story is, as positive as this story is, that Roger was able to be found and found alive.
Yeah, especially the way that story started, where we were told by a mutual friend he was in a lake dead. And I was like, oh, man, this is not – I mean, Roger, I'm glad everything's all right. I love the guy. He's one of the nicer coaches in Dade County, and I'm glad he's back with his family. So,
hey, we didn't get to do a story this week, but
we'll leave it for next week, man.
We'll
Trust
leave it for
it.
next week.
All I'll say is, man, I'm gonna bring some Red Bull into the show next week, just so I can have the same energy as you for an hour and 15 minutes. But I love you too. Oh my God, man, you got so much energy, but you're good. And Corey, it was a great show. And those that want to follow us can follow us on Twitter on the Fish Podcast. We still got to change the Twitter account to take off and make me the only one on there, I guess. But eventually I'll add you guys. But we're all good.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not good at that stuff, so I leave it to others. But we're good. Corey is great. Another great show, and I look forward to talking to you during the week. And you guys have a great, rest of the weekend and next week, man. So,
Stay tuned.
Right.
Thank you, guys.